Hello, everybody, and welcome to another comedian's interview for my blog and podcast, A Rich Comic Life. My name is Richard Gill, and my blog describes my experiences of watching over 1,000 comedians over the last 47 years and counting. My guest today is the wonderful Mr. Barry Ferns.
Hello. Thank you, Richard. A delight to be here. Thank you so much, and to be one of the thousands you've watched, one of the over 1,000. Insane.
That's bonkers. It really is. My first ever gig was Les Dawson on a family holiday. I mean, wow. Perfect in Scarborough in 1977, and then a year later we saw Tommy Cooper, and that was it. I was hooked. So
my first ever was a pantomime. I always think pantomimes were the first time you kind of got any sense of breaking the fourth wall, which was kind of the comedy in a pantomime. People kind of mock pantomimes, but they can be good. They're great, really great. And who was it? I think Cannonball came down to Bournemouth and did a pantomime. You know who I always loved? Anita Dobson. She's not a comedian, but she was great in pantomime.
I bet she was
really. Yeah.
We saw Cannonball a few years ago doing pantomime, and I was in the pub afterwards, and they were there. I didn't get a picture, but I went up and I said, "Oh, I'm such a big fan of both of you." And Bobby Ball just turned around and gave me the most perfect grin and went, "We're still working, cocker." It was brilliant. It was so good. Anyway. Well, no, it's not about that. It's about the next hour is going to be about your comedy career. I'm delighted you're here. Thank you so much for being a guest. And I'd like to start off with going right back to the start and asking you, how did you become a comedian in the first place?
Well, I kind of ask myself that question sometimes because it was pre-rational. Like when I was about 7, I got a tape recorder that you could record your voice on at the same time. It was a personal stereo. And I used to read joke books into that and then listen back to myself telling those jokes under my covers late at night. But the tragedy was, you see, though, is that I always wanted to be funny and I never was. I was that annoying person in class that was always trying to be funny and never quite managing it. And then at the age of about 13, 14, and part of that was because of a tough home life, and other kids smell vulnerability and they kind of like prey on it a lot. But about the age of 13 or 14, there's something that clicked in. I was studying comedy routines. I remember writing down kind of like episodes of Blackadder and highlighting all the jokes, and Newman and Baddiel writing all their jokes out line for line for line. And there was something that osmosized in, and about the age of 13, I became funny at school, and then began writing my own jokes. And I did my first ever gig when I was 16 years old. So it was kind of from the age of 7 to the age of 16, I was doing the research. and let's say I died every single year between 7 and 12. And it's interesting. I don't die too much because I'm quite on stage, because I'm quite a friendly performer. And I think it's quite hard to die if you're a good MC, because you can kind of always swing out of it. But I did die hard for the first kind of 12 years of my life. So I paid my dues there.
It's weird because having seen so many comedians over the years, I can memorize jokes and tell them to friends and whatnot. And I think because I've got the laugh, I can make it funny, but it's like half of them go, "Well, I don't get that." Now I don't know that I've told it wrong or did a wrong thing or whatever. But I love telling one-line jokes, especially to people. Let's move on. Can you describe your first ever gig, please? So you're bowling along, and you must have thought one day, "I'd like to be a comedian."
Yeah. So I'd been writing jokes. I've been working at Burger King, and I'd been doing paper rounds. So I used to do paper round. I used to do about 12 paper rounds a week. I was really kind of working it. And I used to have three tapes that I listened to. One was Victoria Wood, Lucky Bag. One was Rowan Atkinson Live. And one was this Esquire magazine tape that had like Bill Hicks on and Greg Proops and some other things. I just used to listen to it again and again and again, taking everything in. And I was writing jokes at the same time. And I'd started to work at Burger King after that. And it was such a mundane job. I'd be sweeping up or doing things and be thinking of jokes, thinking of one-liners mostly, because that's kind of where my head was. And so I'd been writing it, and I didn't really know what else to do about it. My experience of going to gigs had been, I went to Glastonbury Festival for free when I was 14, and it was free to get in. And I sat in the comedy tent and saw the whole London or the UK comedy circuit come to me. I just sat in it from 12 o'clock midday to 12 o'clock midnight. And it's just, Malcolm Hardy was emceeing, or Booth Biggerfo, and like it just, Harry Hill was headlining, or Rob Newman, or whoever else was coming along, and it's just comedian after, and I was just taking it in. I went to all the festivals that year, and just went to Reading Festival in the comedy tent, went to Phoenix Festival in the comedy tent, and to the point where comedians would kind of recognize me from that. Lee Evans came through once and went, "You were here at Glastonbury, weren't you?" Because Lee Evans liked to see the inside, like to see the area that he was performing in. He was quite a nervous performer, because I met him a few times around it, and like really diligent and quite nervous. So I'd kind of got this sense of what it was, but I had no idea how to access it. And then a comedy club opened in Bournemouth, and I saw it in the paper, and it was like wanted acts for comedy club. And so I went down, and there was me, and there was a guy who I only realized 10 years later he had a stage name. I knew him as Eric. His name was Eric Shun. Erection. That was his name. That was his funny name. But I was calling him Eric the whole time. I had no idea it was a fake name. So I went on stage and told my kind of puns, and I was, 16-year-old, really, I look younger than 16, telling kind of jokes. Like, this was one of my jokes. I was walking in the woods the other day, and I tripped up on his frog spawn, picked it up and read it, and naked toads, that kind of thing. So like just kind of puns, and
I love that.
And the guy that was running it, a guy called Mr. Jug, or Chris McCall, went, "Yep, you'll be good." And the other acts on the bill were Andrew Maxwell, was just starting off then, and I think it was Dave Thompson had come down. And I went on, and I was so nervous beforehand. There was a car park behind it. It was at a place called the Bricklayers Arms.
Yeah.
And I was kind of so nervous beforehand. I was smoking more than I've ever smoked, because I smoked back then. And you know what? It did. Most of the jokes the crowd were kind of politely quiet for, because they didn't heckle or anything like that. It was maybe a 5-minute set, but there were about 5 jokes that landed. And I've got a recording of it. And it's just the sound of when it landed was so strong and so overwhelmingly strong. I was kind of hooked from that. It's like, wow, I did it. And then I became a bit of not a regular at the club, but then I did another gig at the Comedy Box in Bristol, which is still there, run by Steve Langt. The headliner was Simon Pegg, before Simon Pegg was well known. And a guy called Kev F was emceeing, who now does the Scottish falsetto sock puppets. Does that. But yeah, and then the third gig from that was a paid gig where I did a gig in Midsummer Norton, because Steve Langt, it was back then, Steve Langt could see that I kind of seemed to be good enough. Bristol went very well. And he went, "Could you do 10 minutes in Midsummer Norton next Tuesday?" And I was 16, so I was telling my parents I was going to visit universities or whatever. I had to catch a bus. I had nowhere to stay. I caught the bus to Bristol that night, and then hung around in Bristol until the early bus came, because I had nowhere to stay. And then in Midsummer Norton, and Matt Lucas was headlining before he was well known, and I got to know Matt through that. But and that was just in the middle of Midsummer fucking Norton, in the middle of the night. Just like, all right, both me and Matt were like, what are we going to do now?
So what sort of year was this?
Oh, that was 1997.
97, because I came to London in 92. I've been in London for 30 years. My home city, Carlisle. And the first time I came down to London, my brother lived here, and I used to come and see him. And the first time I think in London for me was 1988. And the first bill I ever saw was the Comedy Store, which was Linda Smith, God bless her. John Maloney was emceeing, Richard Morton was on, and top of the bill was someone called Charles Fleischer, who was never heard of again because he went to Hollywood and he voiced Roger Rabbit.
Did he? He did all right then.
He was like this nutcase, this American nutcase with voices. It was amazing. Wow. But I knew I had the bug for it, because when I first started out, I was talking to you before we came on the record. My first ever gig was Les Dawson. Then it was Tommy Cooper in the 70s. And then the third one, where I established my laugh, we went for a holiday in Torquay, and we went to see Tom O'Connor. And he came on and he did his patter, and I laughed so hard at him that I actually floored the act. He didn't know what to do with me. So he walked off and then came back on again, and then had to start again. I thought, I've got something here. This is good. So, but I then started to go very regularly, and all the names that you said that inspired you, with the Victoria Wood, Bill Hicks, Lee Evans, everybody I saw either in Carlisle or Manchester or in London, and I then started creating a spreadsheet, and that's where the blog came from. I thought, who's going to want to read this?
Wow, I love the way that you established a laugh. I mean, in the same way that like I'd be saying, I established my first routine or my joke. You're like, I've got something here. I've got a laugh. It's like, I tell you what,
just loud.
These days, if you've got a laugh, you can get employment. Kind of like in a comedy audience anywhere. You are absolutely
amazing. So your gigs are going okay. Did they? So the start of them, was it like 5-minute spots that you did in pubs, and you brought friends along? Because I'm normally the friend that goes along and supports a lot of new comedians. Was that how it worked? Was that how you got into regular gigging?
No, well, that didn't happen. And then, I mean, I did my first 5-minute spot at the Comedy Club in Bournemouth, Mr. Jones, and then second at the Comedy Box. But then Steve Lank said, "Have you got more material?" And I said, "Well, how long?" And he booked me for, I think it was 15 minutes.
Wow!
And I mean, that was me throwing everything at the wall. That was my third gig, and I think I did about 12. And it went much better than it should have done. But it was, and I can't believe really the learning curve on those 3 gigs. And then there weren't that many gigs on the South Coast at that point. So there was the Crocodile Club in Brighton. I remember doing that. And then Mr. Jugs was, but in that first year, I wasn't. So, and you'd kind of really just be doing tryout spots. But at that point, one of the reasons, I always say this, people don't realize it, but one of the reasons that things got so hard for comedians is that if it used to be in the 90s and early 2000s, that if you're a new comedian, you were often on the bill with a lot of very established acts. Like you'd have Harry Hill at the, and then in the middle, you'd have somebody that's experienced doing a 10-minute spot, and then you'd have a 5-minute spot who's brand new, might never have done it before, and then you've got the opening act is an established act. But you'd have, and that could go any way, that 5-minute spot, because it could go brilliantly, it could go awfully. But what was special about that is it gave new acts a chance to see the established acts. It gave the established acts a chance to see the new acts, and it really integrated people. And there was a sense of, and you could get progressed. So if you did well on that night, the booker would say, "I've seen you, you've done well, here's 10 minutes, here's some money for 10 minutes.
Wow.
And I always say that one of the weaknesses about comedy these days is that you don't as many get the new acts on the big bills,
Yeah.
And people always say, Angel Comedy is like, how come you don't do longer slots? And I always say that our short slots at Angel is like all of the short slots in the country that evaporated, like they're all here at Angel Comedy, because like that's kind of, you need those slots when you start to begin. You need to play to a full room, because often, like you said, if you're somebody's friend, sometimes, I mean, you're playing to 4 people in a room, and it's so hard to find out if it's funny or not to 4 people. But with a full room on a Friday or Saturday night, I mean, if it doesn't work, and if it does work, but you get a real sense of the life of it. And so I always think it's a share. So I was very lucky to have started when there was that kind of new acts could go on. Like, I performed with Alistair McGowan, Simon Pegg, Matt Lucas, Mark Lamar, and and I was only doing 5-minute spots, and I was a nerd there going, "Hello, how are you?" I've seen you on TV. It's very exciting.
No.
But and then if I had a good gig, they'd be like, they'd be friendly, and they'd be, "That was really good," encouraging. Or I remember the hardest death. I'll tell you that when you come to you. There's a question about the hardest
question
death
later on,
and but it's about a big act who had a big effect.
It's interesting what you say, because a lot of the comedians I talk to, they all say it's, and I agree with them, it's all about experience. And I believe that you have to you have to have a bad gig to become a better comic, and you gain from all the experience that you give. And to say that you had the opportunity to do that on bills is fascinating, because I agree with you. I don't know whether there's enough opportunity now, if I or a friend of mine was just starting out, to go round and experience all the different audiences. I don't know. I mean, we have just come off a pandemic, but even so, it is coming back to life big time. The comedy clubs are open nearly every night now.
But I mean, you're right there. I mean, one of the things that I think never gets really mentioned is that every audience is different, just like every comedian is different, and that playing a gig in Dorset or in Hartlepool is totally different from playing a gig even in London. Playing a gig at Up the Creek is totally different from playing a gig at the Comedy Store. You've got a totally different kind of, and you do have to learn how to edit your act or how you say things. I mean, if you walk into certain places and you start swearing, you are going to bomb however strong. If you open with your big vegan joke in Cardiff, it's not going to do as well as it might do in Islington.
It's really interesting, because I see most of the comedy now down in London, but when I go back to Carlisle, or I like to go to a lot of festivals and whatever, and I see comedy there as well. So, certainly in Carlisle, I've seen some big acts over the last few years who, if I say to them, I'm going to be in the audience, they're going to think, oh, it's fair. Rich is in, that's at least something. But I watch them deal with difficult audiences, because they don't know, either they've never been there before, or they've been there once or twice, and it's like, oh, I don't know how this audience is going to react tonight. So it's very true what you say.
There's but you only see that if you see multiple gigs like you do, or does.
Tell me about your writing process for a routine or a show. Do you have a specific way of writing? Do you have ideas? Do you write things down? How do you go about the process of writing a show?
If I'm talking to somebody and they laugh at something I say, I write it down, put it into a little book of ideas, and then when I've got some time to myself, I'll sit down and go, what's the nugget of that idea? Where is that idea come from? And then if I think it's got some legs, I'll then, or if there's something that I can express that isn't just about the situation with that person, I'll then say it on stage, or find a way to say it on stage. And then often, if I say it on stage, it will grow from that. So if you've got one laugh, then I'll almost go, right, my scaffold is this setup, this punchline. How much space can I put in between that punchline? Or if I get something, is there another topper I could put at the end of it? Like how many stepping stones can I get, and how much can I? What are the audience laughing more at or less at? But it really comes from being on all the time and just thinking all the time of like, what's somebody laughing at when you're chatting to them? Or I might have a thought and I might laugh at it myself. I am also a person.
Would you say you're an analyzer? Do you analyze? Do you play back what you've said, or do you analyze where you could get more laps or less laps after the event?
I have to analyze because my memory is absolutely rubbish.
Right.
So I've often in the past said things on stage because I improvise a lot and I chat a lot as well. And I'll often say something or improvise something, and somebody will say to me afterwards, that's a good joke. You should keep that joke. I remember James Acaster saying that you really should be recording these, because the amount of premises you come up with is ridiculous. So you come up with a huge amount of premises which you kind of get one joke from, but these are proper premises that you could run away with.
He's an amazing comedian, James Acaster. He really is. Watching him is fascinating. There's a testimonials page on my blog, and he gave me the best ever testimonial. He said to me, if I wasn't a comedian, I would happily sit next to Richard Gill and make him laugh all day. I thought that was lovely.
Yeah, that's lovely.
His performance is always amazing, and you can see the analytical approach he's got to that.
And he rinses a premise. So if he comes up with a premise that he likes and gets a joy for, he can absolutely zero in on it and really get a lot of kind of
very much so
out of it.
Yeah, it's fascinating how many different comedians approach it differently. But so thank you very much. That was a really good answer. You are a compere as well as a comedian. Do you prefer comparing to doing a solo routine on stage, and why?
I think I don't compare them too much. I think I prefer doing a routine, but purely because it's a bit more selfish. Like as a compere, what you have to do is as a compere, you get to have fun, but you have to include everybody. You have to bring everyone in. As an act, you do have to include people. You have to kind of be open as you're talking to them, but you're very much taking people along a path that you've decided. Whereas as a compare, you all decide the path together in a way, and you know when you've gotten to the destination, because the destination is we're all happy, we're all here, and we're all ready for the act. So it's slightly different in the sense of, but I think I prefer. I know I definitely prefer doing spots because it's I get to choose the pace, I get to choose the destination and the path. And that is, it's a I guess it's less enjoyable energetically because I like feeding off other people, but it's more enjoyable in terms of attention and my intention, and also kind of a conversation with the audience that is of interest to me as well. I'm choosing what I'm talking about.
Yeah. I've told this story many times to many comedians. Years and years ago, I had a go at stand-up comedy myself. I wanted to get it out of my system, and I knew a promoter, and he said to me, "I've got a gong show for you." And I said, "Oh, right. Well, I'll write a script." And I wrote a script about crashing cars in Carlisle just after I'd passed my driving test. I was never a very good driver. And he liked it. And he said, right. He said, they will gong you off if they don't like you. So I walked out. There's 3 people in the audience. And the first line I said was, "Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Many people think I look like Eddie the Eagle Edwards, the ski jumper, but I can't see the resemblance myself." And I think that's a great line because looks like some old bloke at the back just went, "Fuck off," and jumped me off. I walked up on footsteps, and the promoter said, have another go. And the similar thing happened. And I said, "I don't know whether I'll ever be a comedian, but I'll support them all forevermore. But never say never." It's the most wonderful thing to watch. It must be amazing to perform, when you've got your routines and everything ready, and you walk out and you've literally got 30 seconds for an audience to like you and or to warm to you, and as soon as you speak, you're away. I can imagine.
Yeah, it's a great story you tell there, because I do think that so much in life is about luck and
Yeah.
circumstance. And I always think that, but for the way things happen, it could have gone a totally different way. Like if you hadn't had a heckler in those kind of ways, if it had been somebody going, "That's a great joke,"
Yeah. Who
I
knows?
could be interviewing you right now. Well, I will be interviewing you for the Edinburgh podcast. But like, I always think that when somebody, everything in life is hard work, and so we're all trying our hardest. So I always think it's a little bit disingenuous when somebody says, "Well done on your achievements," and everyone's like, "Yep, it's all me." It's like I saw a lot of it is luck, isn't it? Let's face it.
Without a doubt,
being in the right place at the right time. You can define how you can reduce the variables like in work, but you've got to have somebody that comes along and offers you something, or
very, very much so. I mean, to find my niche, to find this blog in my mid-50s and the success of it, and I hope my passion comes through when I'm writing about it or talking to people. It's just extraordinary, and I've got all the experience to build on, having seen thousands, as I said at the start. So we mentioned earlier, I can't believe you have a bad gig, but please tell me your worst and best gig, please.
Well, I mean, the bad gig that absolutely gutted me, it was my first proper death, and it was maybe my 7th or 8th gig, and it was a place called Cactus Jack's in Salisbury, and I'd been asked to do the gig. It's somebody that had been come to another gig. "Oh, do you want to do my gig?" And so I went there, and I turned up at Cactus Jack's, and it's a restaurant, and there's a pallet, just a wooden pallet in the corner of a restaurant. And it's kind of half restaurant. I don't know what it was. It's a Cactus Jack's, right? And there's a microphone there, and I'm like, I'm 16, maybe 17 at that time, and I've got my puns. That's all I've got. I've got no other real skills of like how to make this a gig. And the guy comes on stage and literally says, "Here's your first act, Barry Ferns." No warm up whatsoever. Just like the audience didn't even know there was a gig happening, right? And so I absolutely said my jokes to a confused mumble or a silence. But I tell you something, it was gutting. And I went to the back, and there was a side area, and I went to the back with the head in my hands. Now, the headliner that night was Dylan Moran.
Oh, wow.
Right? I mean, what Dylan Moran was doing in a Cactus Jack's, I don't know. But I mean, he was such a great comedian even then,
Yeah.
And he really took time to sit with me and just kind of go, "Listen, this isn't really a gig. This isn't a gig. This isn't, the parameter, what this is it's a pallet in the corner of a restaurant. You shouldn't judge how good you are, but, on this." And it was such I really, but the thing is, I didn't really know Dylan Moran from anyone else. So I was like that. So really, I was going, "Thanks, mate, but I know I'm rubbish. This happened. It's rubbish." And and then obviously Dylan went on, and he's brilliant and smashed it. Absolutely brought the gig together.
Yeah.
Did all the things that you need to do to, that can congeal a group of people into an audience, and absolutely, like, I wouldn't say tore the roof off the place, because I don't think that you could in that gig, but it certainly felt like a gig when he was doing it. And and he sat down afterwards and he took time and said, "This is what I did. This is why it worked. These are the kind of skills that you don't have right now, but need." And really took time, and I'm really grateful for that. Like,
brilliant to give you advice and to encourage you. That's nothing but good.
Yeah, and so it was my worst gig, but like, I do think that like that that experience of just being kind of included as a comedian was, and in terms of best gig, I think, I mean, the first gig is always the best gig, really, because that's what hooks you. But I always think my best gigs are the ones, like, I don't have a particular best gig. I love the Arthur's Seat gig that I do on Arthur's Seat in Edinburgh every year, and I couldn't pick one out of those. But the reason why it's my favorite gig is it's the embodiment, I think, of what comedy or the Fringe is. It's shouldn't work, right?
Yeah.
It's outside. It could rain at any minute. It's in the middle of nowhere, but it somehow does. And everybody kind of comes together. And I always think a gig is, I think as humans, it's easy for us to see the person talking is in control, and it's not the case. We are all here to have a gig.
Exactly.
Like if you got totally an audience,
yeah.
It's like there's this a friend of mine who's a storyteller has this thing of speaker theory. But what it is like the speaker, it just happens to be the person behind the microphone. But really, we're all there to have a gig. That's what we're there. And it's not that person isn't doing it. We're all joining in. Like you with your laugh, are just as, with your signature laugh, but as important as every other person and the community.
Yeah.
And it's kind of, there's an egoistic kind of sense of our culture of like, oh, they're the important person because they've got the microphone. But for me, the best gigs are when everybody is there together. You're there in the room or you're there anywhere else. And that's why I like the Arthur Seat gig, because there's a real sense of we are all here together. And this is a special thing that we're all creating in this. And about 200 people show up to it. And it shouldn't work, but it does.
It always does every year, doesn't it? It's wonderful. That's again, that's a great answer. You mentioned before about nerves. Do you suffer from nerves? Did you suffer from nerves? And if so, how do you get over them before you do a gig?
Yeah, it's a tough thing. I don't suffer from nerves on a day-to-day gig, but what I do find is that I can often, if it's an important gig or if there's a particular reviewer in, I can crumble quite easily.
Right.
Like because I was quite heavily bullied at school, and like I have the sense of if somebody's coming to judge me or if I think somebody dislikes me, I absolutely crumble. My confidence goes, and so what can sometimes happen in gigs is if it's an important one, like a competition final. I remember a couple of competition finals, or if there's a particular TV person in, or a particular reviewer that's I know has reviewed me badly before, I can do the job, but I just can't. I get very nervous beforehand, and I can't do it in a relaxed way. So I don't kind of get into the zone, and I go withdraw within myself and don't necessarily I'm not as relaxed.
That is surprising, because whenever I've seen you, you're always very confident on stage.
Yeah, well, it's at specific times, but it's definitely something that I have. And like I tell you something, the confidence that I do have on stage at most of the time, I'm lucky to have. But you know where it comes from? It's not confidence. It's almost like a joy that we're all here doing it. And I always think the strongest form of confidence is playfulness. If you can get in the spirit of play and you can get everyone to join you in the spirit of play, it comes across as confidence. But what really is, it's a naturalness that we all have when we're in our element. Everybody in their element is confident and passionate and charismatic, and it's just if you put them out of their element, everyone's a nervous scaredy cat of like what's going on or whatever. That's
really, really interesting, because I wanted a stand-up comedy club near to where I live. I live in South London, and that resembled like a Fringe room. And so I found Always Be Comedy about 6 years ago, the Tommy Field in Kennington. And
brilliant gig.
It is superb. And every time I would go to any comedy club, I would either sit mid-row or at the back, because I thought my laugh will carry it. I didn't have much confidence in myself. And my friend said, come along and sit on the front row. And that was it. And it was this inclusion of getting everybody involved. So now I've got this front row seat whenever I go. And James Gill, the compere, always says to me, if you don't turn up, the comedians are wanting to know where is he? And that's like amazing, and I'm thinking, my God, all I go and do is go and laugh. And it does build confidence, whether you're on stage or sitting in the audience. There's no doubt about it. And they do it very much like yourself. They do it in a very playful way. They're not having a go at anybody. They just want everybody to get involved and have a great time. And what's not to love? That's the magic of it. Let's move on to the Edinburgh Fringe. At the time of recording, we've just had the 75th Edinburgh Fringe, which is extraordinary. I celebrated my 55th birthday at the start of August as well, so I'm 20 years behind them.
20 years behind the Fringe. You'll catch up. You're grand.
Thank you. I've been very, very lucky in that my holiday is the Fringe. I've been going every year since 2005, apart from the 2 years in the pandemic. So this would be something like my 15th year, and I see about 50 shows in a week. Need holiday by the time I come back, but I have the best time, and it was lovely seeing you there. And it was just wonderful this year. Tell me about your experience of your very first Fringe, and what was it like for you?
Well, I've got two stories around that. My very first Fringe was, I'd been working at Burger King. I'd heard about the Fringe, and I took 5 days, and I went up there to Edinburgh, and I stayed at the hostel, the High Street hostel. That was, I don't think it was in Nidri Street, but it was in the street Blackfriars Street, just next to one down from Nidri Street, and it was the first time where I'd really kind of taken any time away. We didn't holiday much when I was a kid, and I just turned up, and it was amazing because the hostel, they give out free comps tickets. I mean, so that year I was just in my element. So because if shows weren't selling well, they'd paper and the hostel was a great place for people to get audience. So I saw Logan Murray that year in the wee room, Dara O'Brien doing an awful show about physics. I mean, bless him. It was so in depth. It was
Must be a first.
I know. It's so I feel so lucky sometimes when I always feel lucky when I see somebody that's brilliant struggling, because you, not for them, I feel bad for them, but you learn so much, and it also allows it allows you to see a little bit behind the curtain. It's such a gift, I think. But it was a really interesting show, but it was too dense because it was all about physics. He's just got a doctorate in physics.
Yeah, he's mad on science, isn't he?
Yeah, it was amazing to watch, but it was like, and that might have been the case because I was 16 at the time, 16, 17. And so I went up and got absolutely hooked for it. I saw Bib and Bob, which is Jerry Sadowitz and Logan Murray on Carlton Hill.
Wow.
Which is an insane show. And this happened the first year. So I'm there, and I know all the performers, a lot of them, from seeing Glastonbury Festival. And I went to see Jeff Green, who's a comedian. He's an English comedian, moved to Australia, great comedian, the Comedy Store regular, real friends of Sean Knock and Bill Bailey and that kind of crowd. Yeah. And so I went to see him, and then he's in the Pleasance bar afterwards, and I just go up to him and go, hello, because I'm, a young kid that's just trying to, I don't know anyone else in Edinburgh. And we start talking, and he's talking to other people, and I'm just standing next to him. I'm trying to bring out. And anyway, then Bill Bailey comes up to him and goes, we're going for a pizza. Do you want to Jeff, do you want to come? And he went, yeah, I'll come. And I just went, can I come? Right. So and he was, bless him, because he's really polite. He just kind of went, yeah, I guess so, right? I get in a cab with Jeff Green, Bill Bailey, Sean Locke, two other people, I think Hattie Hayridge as well.
Wow.
We go off to this Italian restaurant, get into the cabin to this Italian restaurant, and we're all sat around the restaurant, and I've got no money. I got nothing. I can't afford to eat a meal. I've just asked myself into this thing. I'm sat next to Bill Bailey, and at one point Bill Bailey turns to me, so yeah, what do you do? And I went, A levels? And he went, oh, right, what A levels are you doing? I was just listening in awe to the conversation, not quite knowing what a joke was, when it wasn't a joke. I remember going to the toilet and coming back, and there being this awkward silence around the table, which must have been them going, who the hell is this kid? What's he doing here? I couldn't afford a pizza, so I just ordered the cheapest starter that I could afford and just ate it as slowly as I possibly could as I sat there. And bless them, they kind of included me as best they can, as you can, kind of slightly awkward 17.
What a bill though. I mean that is a routine, that story. That's wonderful. What a start to your fringe. That was brilliant. What's the other story you've got?
Oh, well, the second time I went to the Fringe was by accident. I was entered for a competition called So You Think You're Funny. Back then, So You Think You're Funny wasn't, you didn't apply for it. You got nominated for it. So, and Steve Lank had obviously been asked, who would you recommend for So You Think You're Funny? And he put my name into the ring. And so, right, you're in the semi-finals of So You Think You're Funny in Edinburgh on this day. Anyway, I couldn't do it because I couldn't get up there. I didn't have the money that year. There was no way for me to get up. But it just so happened that I was in London doing a gig for somebody called Melanie Miller, who had booked me for a series of gigs. And Melanie, she ran this place called the Red Rose Cafe, which is Red Rose Comedy Club in Finsbury Park. And I went up there, did the gig, and she went, "Oh, are you going to Edinburgh?" And I said, I've got a gig in Edinburgh, So You Think You're Funny. She was like, "Oh, that's a good thing. Are you going to do that?" And I said, "No, I can't get up there. I've not got any money. I've got no way of getting up there." And she went, "I'm driving up there tonight. You can come up with me if you like."
Wow.
So I went up with her and her friend Susan, and ended up, her family stayed in Musselburgh. I lived in Musselburgh. So I ended up living in Musselburgh for 3 days with her mum and dad, right? Wow. And she paid me up front for like 5 gigs so that I had some money. And she just dropped me off in the middle of Edinburgh, like with this money that I had. And then that night I had the gig, which I died on my arse for, because if Edinburgh is anything, if the Edinburgh Festival is anything, it doesn't like puns. And all I had at that stage was puns. They looked at me like, in Dorset, they love a pun. But in Edinburgh, they're like, this isn't sophisticated enough for us. And anyway, so I was a bit gutted that I didn't do very well. And then that night, I didn't have anywhere to stay. I went to see Matt Lucas's show, and at the Assembly that year. And then Matt said I could stay with him. I stayed with him and David Walliams for a night because they were living in the same place. And then I had to figure out how to get home, because I was like, oh no, how do I get home? I haven't got quite enough money for the bus thing. So I had to phone my parents and go, I'm in Edinburgh.
Oh no.
I think my dad bought a ticket that I could then get back on a National Express.
So what year was this when you first went up?
I think that must have been 97.
Right.
Yeah, it was 96, 97. Yeah.
And have you been going every year since?
Every year since. I've taken 2 years off and I've done everything. I've performed on the street. I performed on the street with a 13-year-old called Ruben.
Wow.
He was 13 years old and he could juggle fire from a 6-foot unicycle. Absolutely phenomenal.
Unbelievable.
That's now a male model. He's hilarious. He's got about 100,000 followers on Instagram.
Wow.
But anyway, so I did street performing with him. I've done sketch shows. I've done stand-up shows. I've done shows on Arthur Seat. I've done pretty much everything in Edinburgh that you could be part of. And I've gone bankrupt from taking shows to Edinburgh. I went bankrupt in 2007.
Mate.
Because in 99, 2000, 2001, 2002 and 2004, like it just costs so much money to pay for shows on.
It's far too much. It really is. But it's still cheaper than going to see them on tour. The actual ticket prices.
The actual ticket.
It's as simple as that. It is going up.
But at that time, I didn't think I had any other way of making it as a comedian. And as a young kid from a council estate in Dorset, I just didn't know how else would you do it. So all I did was borrow money. Then I'd work for 11 months trying to work off the debt. And then I'd work off half of it. And then I'd borrow money again. It cost about £5,000 each year to do it. You need flyers and venue and double rent because you're paying rent in London and as well as Edinburgh. And it just got more and more into debt. And then I ended up, you'll like this, I ended up in the 2007 show. I changed my name by deed poll to Lionel Richie for the show. Like it was a publicity stunt that really, we had a fun campaign around it. But it did mean that when I went bankrupt as Lionel Richie. Barry Ferns did not go bankrupt. I had to go to the Royal Courts of Justice, put my hand on the Bible and say, "I, Lionel Richie, solemnly swear." And the clerk of the court laughed in my face, Richard. One of your laughs. He absolutely laughed in my face. Because
That's brilliant.
But yeah, and that was all because of Edinburgh. That was all because of Edinburgh.
So all these many years that you're going, tell me about your current project, which I know about, which you've very kindly told me in the past. You're writing a book, aren't you?
Yeah, so I'm writing a book because I always think the magic about Edinburgh. So there aren't that many books about the Edinburgh Fringe, and it's been going 75 years. And crucially, there aren't many books about all the brilliant performers people have seen.
Yeah,
everybody really knows about. Now, you often hear about the stars, like, Eddie Izzard had a 5-year plan and went there and became famous off doing shows at Edinburgh. But what you don't really hear about is, like the unknown people, like, I don't know, Twonky's Kingdom. Do you know Twonky's Kingdom?
I've heard of him.
Twonky came back year after year after year with these ornate puppets, and it was absolutely bonkers. Totally tonto, the shows, but they were magical. And like, what's happened to Paul that does those, or even acts like Earl Oaken that didn't necessarily get huge fame, but is a brilliant act. Or people that just came up one year and it was what they did before they went on to have a family or become the farmer that they were. Because the thing about the Fringe that I think is magical is it accepts everyone.
Exactly.
The Pleasance venue doesn't accept everyone, or any of the particular venues, but really, if you want to do it, you can find a place to perform.
You can find a place to do it.
And that's what the Fringe was. And it's people have got a passion, however crazy that passion is, and they're like, you know what? I want to juggle dogs. And I juggle dogs naked. That's my thing. I want to see it. I think this can make and the Fringe goes, all right, come along. Let's see how that goes for you. And that's,
Well, I wish you every success with the book, and I would love to be in it. I'd love to have a chat with you about it, because
definitely we're gonna have a proper chat.
Yeah, definitely, because my experiences of going are exactly that. What I do is there's about 10 people that come along with me at different times of the week, and I try and cater for everybody with different sorts of acts and whatnot. So I produce spreadsheets every year, which I've got and whatnot. What is coming across is your love of supporting comedians like me. It's a bit like me with the blog. The blog is not just big names, it's up and coming comedians. And I saw this when I saw you compare the comedy the new comedian at the Hastings Fringe.
Oh, yeah, that was a lovely gig, that. Yeah,
Edinburgh. Yeah, and you compare a lot of them, and are you based at Angel Comedy? Is that where you mainly do your comparing of gigs, or do you go right around London?
Yeah, I go around the country. I go kind of wherever I'm asked. I do Comedia a good amount. The Boat Show up the creek. Like I'm around London at different gigs. But Angel Comedy, what Angel Comedy was in 2010. I'd gone bankrupt 3 years before,
right.
And I'd not really MC'd at that point. And I started MCing a gig at the Camden Head, which is where the old Meccano Club used to be. That started in 1985. Is where Eddie Izzard did his first gigs, and and lots of other people came through there and did amazing gigs there. So and what happened was I was a much better MC than I thought. I didn't know I'd be this good, and I was very lucky. And I say I'm this good, I don't mean that I just mean that I'm good at caring about the gig and bringing people together, and people really enjoy it. And I'm quite quick on my feet. My brain's very ADHD. It's all over the place. So, and that lends itself to a creative kind of good MC. And it became so busy the one night I was running that then the pub went, do you want to run a second night? And I went, all right, I'll run a second night. And then we had queues around the block. And at the time I was also MCing with somebody that I was going out with called Katerina Vrana, who's a Greek comedian, brilliant Greek comedian. And we were going out together at the time. And the pub kind of grew up around my MCing, and also Katerina's to some degree. She was there a lot. And
that's brilliant.
And then it was 3 nights a week, 5 nights a week, 7 nights a week, and it was always free. And the whole idea of the club was it was all of my friends, a lot of my friends on the circuit at that time didn't have an agent. They had nowhere to perform to a busy room that was a good room. And the reason the club came up was we decided, you know what, instead of paying £100 to get to Hartlepool to do a 5-minute spot and not get paid for it, why don't we take that money and pay for a big headliner like Richard Herring came along or Izzy Sooty and make it a free gig so that we know we're going to get a big audience every, Friday or Saturday. So, because you've got this headliner and then we get a nice gig and we also get to book our brilliant friends who are all kind of like brilliant acts, but they're not on TV or they don't have the big agents. And then that's what it became really. So it built up accidentally. I never wanted to run a comedy gig, or run a club, but it built up around me because I loved what I was doing and around Katerina and Sarah Pearce and Linus at the time. And it kind of took off because of that. And also because there was nowhere else for acts at that time that had shorter slots and no agents to perform, so it was James Gill.
Such a good thing you've done. Such a good thing you've done.
Thank you. And like James Gill came to do the gig early days. His early gigs were at the Angel Comedy Club, and I mean he's always been brilliant. But what he's done at ABC again, it's I think quite similar to Angel. You can tell James about this. But I actually, before the Bill Murray started, I actually met up with James and said, "Do you want to start a comedy club?" And James was like, "You can't start a comedy club, mate. Nobody starts a comedy club." And because he's also very responsible. I'm a bit of a maverick. I've changed my name to Lionel Richie. I'm a bit mental and all that. And James was just going, "I'm not going to get myself.
Not going to get involved with this."
But he's started his own club there, and it's ABC is a magical club. It's beautiful, and a lot of that is to do with James. James loves everyone. He brings everyone together. He's got a real sense of togetherness. Nobody is told to go away from ABC. Everyone is family and everyone is welcome. And I hope that is true of Angel as well. Like
very much so. I mean, the times that I went there, you can tell you can see the similarities. Everybody was very warm. You had a wonderful audience who were up for it. You had 2 or 3 shows per night, even, and it was just fun. It was a wonderful run. It was just fantastic. So well done. Great. And I'm really pleased for you. Let's move on.
I'll just say it's a team effort, though. There are lots of us that do it. It's a total team effort. So I happen to be the lucky one to start it, but it is absolutely all of us. So brilliant. I'll pass on your well done.
Please do. Yes, please. Moving on from that, talking about a lot of comedians, who makes you laugh? Who are your favourite comedians, past and present? Did you have comedy growing up?
My favourites are Sean Locke, Bill Bailey, Eddie Izzard. There was a show called Rock with Sean Locke and Bill Bailey, where I think Bill played a rock star and Sean played his roadie. That was just a brilliant show.
I remember that. Yeah.
But do you? Yeah, it was in the Pleasance one or the Pleasance beside. So I like the slightly surreal ones, comedians that can really write a joke. So and Bill and Sean are very particular like that. They seem surreal, but it's so well put together. I also like.
It's such a sad loss, Sean Locke. Just interrupting you. I mean, what that comedian could have done, and Bill Bailey is just one of the best. He really is. Sorry. Carry on.
But no, Bill Bailey's consistently the best, and Sean's such a shame because there wasn't for a long time. Sean was the comedian's comedian, and I loved him, and I was like, why is this person not on TV? I know he went on TV, but there was a time where all of the other people that I found really funny were like popping up on TV. Bill Bailey was there, Joe Brand, everyone else, but Sean wasn't. But it was great to see him succeed because like he was brilliant for years before he was on TV as well.
I saw him live twice, I think, before he was on TV, and you could see the spark. It was igniting. I said before, it's one of the wonderful things about the blog, writing all the gigs down, you're watching them grow, and he was a classic example. And when he was ready for TV, it was just perfect. He really was. Yeah.
The timing. But I'm a big fan of the more surreal is better because then it gets me out of my own head. So I love, Paul Foot, Tony Law. I really, you know what, this year Edinburgh, who did I enjoy? I really like Bobby Mayer as well. I know he's not surreal, but I thought Bobby was like, you know, really the epitome of a really, really good comedian and really well put together. I like Red Richardson as well. I always think of them both in the same breath. But you know, Catherine Ryan is super. In fact, Harriet Kemsley, Bobby's partner, is also brilliant. But there are, I mean, the thing is, there are so many great comedians around at the moment that you kind of like, you know, you could name a lot. But I think, yeah, those ones that you first connect with when you're younger as well, I think have a special place. You know,
well, the reason why I do the blog is Morecambe and Wise for me. I can remember aged about 4-year-old. The entire family, old or young, crying at the TV with laughter. And I never, ever got to see them. I've got everything behind me, all the books and everything, and seen all the plays and everything about it, and met the son, and, you know, but I've never seen them live, but I've seen everybody else. I saw Ken Dodd, the two Ronnies, Tommy Cooper, Les Dawson, all in the 70s, and then into the 80s it was Victoria Wood and all the alternative Chris. I saw French and Saunders, Rick Mail, on and on and on, Frank Skinner, Jack D, and then right up until like it got weekly, you know, in the 2000s, where I'm very good at picking a bill of comedians for someone who doesn't normally go, and if you've got 5 of them, at least one of them they will like, and it's that's the magic of it. I love going to shows where I've never heard of them, and you sit there. You said before about being in the moment. That's what it's all about, being live. For me, I like to go out on a Saturday or a Friday night or whatever, have a few beers, and then sit down and say, right, how are you going to entertain me? And what you all do for me is magical. It really is. So thank you.
No, but thank you. Like I said, it's all everyone, isn't it? We all make it happen.
It is. It is. It's amazing. I've much enjoyed talking to you.
Likewise.
I really have. Just before we go, is there anything else you'd like to say? Have you got any podcasts? Have you got any shows that you want to promote? Any book? Well, you've got your book coming out, which I will, of course, buy and hopefully be in.
Well, I've to say coming out. I've got to write it yet, so I'll interview you. But I'm always making stuff. So I've got a couple of podcasts. One's called The Obituary Show, which is a fake obituary show. One's a called Ambient Tales for Traumatized Children, where I work with music producers and put sketches with them. And I'm very proud of those podcasts because they're all self-produced. And but yeah, I'm at the moment I'm trying to put this book together at the same time as actually putting together a show that I think can go around the world a bit, because I've never been to Australia and New Zealand for those festivals, and I thought I'd like to go before, I don't know, Donald Trump gets back into power and blows everyone up. So I was like, and travel before that happens.
Well, where can people find you on social media?
I'm at Barry Ferns on Instagram, or at Barry Ferns on Twitter. But yeah, and then I'm at Angel Comedy this weekend. Next week I'm at the Boat Show. The next weekend after that I'm at Comedia. So I'm I'm around. But the good thing about comedians these days is you just have to put them into Instagram and it will tell you everywhere that they're away.
Well, I for one am coming to see you very, very soon. I think I think you're an extremely funny man, and you always make me laugh so much. So thank you very much for that. And thank you so much for being a great guest. It's been wonderful, and all the best to you.
It's a pleasure, and I'm looking forward to you being on the other side of these questions for the Edinburgh Fringe podcast. So thank you very much.
Definitely, my friend. Definitely. All the best to you.
All the best.
Thank you.